There's that TikTok of that woman being like,
countries in Europe
as different European
That's
countries.
why
I don't know where Italy is.
do not have more differences than states in America.
so let's unpack why she's wrong. Why are different countries in Europe more different than states in the US?
The idea that Europe is inherently much more different is because of the fact that Europe has had a longer time as separate entities.
Yes.
Right. It's had a longer time as separate entities, and at the same time, it's very tied not just to language, but it's also very much tied to culture, religion, and things of the sort, right? Look at Ireland and Northern Ireland. Same country,
massively.
technically.
Yeah.
Right? Same people, technically, but obviously there's been that separation for such a long time. And then if you look at the rest of Europe, that history has been so long of being separated by religion, being separated by language, family, being separated by ideologies in general. Look at Czechoslovakia. Technically, they had the Velvet Divorce, right? Technically, they had a very peaceful split, but it was just because they both identified as two different things, even though Czechs and Slovaks speak similar languages. They both part of the same language family. And then so by that logic, Italy should have split up, right? But then obviously it didn't. But then, okay, if you look at the states, you have all these different states, but they all got the same culture, ideals, and the history is much shorter. And that's because the US in and of itself is a colonial construct. And what we know about colonial constructs is that they aim to wipe out what was there initially and the diversity that was there and supplant this idea of a hegemony. So a hegemony of one country under God. So by establishing that and by wiping out the vast diversity of Native American populations, right? For example, if you go to the Northeast, right, you have the Algonquin-speaking people, so people who speak Mi'kmaq, or for example, Ojibwe, right? And just directly next to them are the Haudenosaunee, right? So the Mohawk, the Seneca, right, and all that. And they belong to two completely different language families, and they were at war with each other for quite a while, or at least over territory. And even then, the Haudenosaunee had 5 different individual ethnic groups that all had very different languages, but they were all related in that they were all Iroquoian languages, right? But at the same time, they were a complex political entity that I would argue has even more diversity than the actual United States of America has now.
But it was just all wiped out.
Well, I mean, they got genocided and stuffed into residential schools. Obviously, they're still around, but obviously they've gone through a lot.
And I think it also builds into the whole thing of when people say the difference between Europe and America is that Europeans think 100 miles is a long way and Americans think 100 years is a long time. Just that kind of idea of how things are thought about is different. I understand, for example, people from Texas saying that they consider, say, Washington State to be almost a completely different country because you are going to have to go so far and do so much to get there. But at the same time, for me, as an English person, that's something I'll never understand. But at the same time, I think a lot of Americans will never understand the level of history and culture that gets built into different countries because their country is still so new. So I think there's that difference as well.
Bosh, definitive answer.
Well, are you going to Rome or are you going to Wigan? You're going to Europe. Great.